The rain hammered Newark's shipping district like it had a personal grudge. Thunder cracked overhead, rattling the windows of the Harbor Light Diner so hard that the neon sign outside flickered twice before steadying itself again. Marcus Hale moved between tables with the kind of exhausted grace that comes from years of holding everything together with willpower and prayer. His black vest was pressed but faded. His white shirt clean but thin at the elbows. At 35, he moved like a man who'd learned that speed and kindness were the only weapons he had left. Two truckers argued loudly near the counter about whose route was worse. A homeless veteran sat shivering in the corner booth, pretending he wasn't. A young mother wrestled with a toddler who'd just launched crayons across the floor like tiny missiles. Marcus saw it all, handled it all, the way he always did. "Gentlemen, how about we save the debate for after you finish those burgers?" His voice was calm, warm, the kind that made angry men remember they were tired, not enemies. The truckers grumbled, but settled down. Marcus slipped a bowl of soup onto the veteran's table without a word, pretending it was a kitchen mistake. The veteran's eyes watered, but he said nothing. Marcus knelt to gather the scattered crayons, handing them back to the toddler with a wink that made the exhausted mother mouth "thank you" like it was a prayer. His phone buzzed in his pocket. Marcus stepped toward the kitchen, his chest tightening before he even looked at the screen. Elijah. "Hey, buddy," Marcus answered, keeping his voice steady even though panic was already climbing his throat. "Dad, my head hurts again." Elijah's voice was small, younger than 12, fragile in the way that made Marcus want to tear the world apart. "I know, son. Did you take the medicine Mrs. Dawson gave you?" "Yeah. It's not working." Marcus closed his eyes. The migraine medication they could afford barely touched Elijah's episodes. The kind that actually worked. That required insurance they didn't have and payments they couldn't make. "I'll be home soon, okay? Try to sleep. I love you." "Love you too, Dad." Marcus stood there in the doorway between the kitchen and the dining room, phone still pressed to his ear even after Elijah hung up. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. The fryer hissed. Somewhere behind him, Jerome scraped the grill clean, pretending not to notice Marcus's shoulders shaking. When Marcus finally returned to the floor, he noticed her for the first time. She sat in the corner booth, the one nobody liked because the heater rattled and the vinyl was cracked, but she didn't seem to notice. Or maybe she didn't care. Her cream-colored coat was tailored, expensive, the kind of thing that didn't belong within 10 miles of this place. Her blonde hair was pinned back in a way that suggested control, precision, wealth. Diamond earrings caught the light every time a car passed outside. She'd been there for over an hour. Ordered chamomile tea. Barely touched it. But she watched everything. Watched Marcus diffuse the argument. Watched him feed the veteran. Watched him clean up crayons. Watched him take that phone call, his face collapsing for just a moment before he rebuilt it into something steady. At 11:47 p.m., she stood, placed cash on the table, and walked toward the door. Marcus cleared her booth 2 minutes later. The receipt sat there, signed in elegant handwriting. The tip line? A bold, unmistakable 0. Marcus stared at it. Anger flickered, then died. He'd seen worse, been treated worse. This was just another Thursday. But then he lifted the plate. Underneath was an envelope. Thick, cream-colored, out of place. Inside, a handwritten note. "I need to speak with you. Tomorrow, 9 a.m., Horizon Tower, 37th floor. Ask for Dr. Liana Ross." Marcus's hands started shaking. Dr. Liana Ross. Billionaire, founder of Ross Biotech, the woman who'd been on the cover of Forbes last month. Why would she come here? And why leave him nothing except everything? Marcus Hale had learned to measure his life in small victories, getting Elijah to school on time, keeping the lights on another week, making rent without choosing between medicine and food. These were the mountains he climbed every single day, invisible to everyone except the people living on the same jagged edge. Tonight's victory was simpler, making it through his shift without collapsing. The Harbour Light Diner sat on the corner of Frelinghuisen Avenue and Delancey Street, where Newark's industrial heart still beat, slow and heavy. Shipping containers stacked like giant building blocks in the distance. Diesel trucks rumbled past, hauling freight toward the port. The diner was a relic, a 1950s throwback with red vinyl booths, a checkerboard floor, and a jukebox in the corner that only played 3 songs because nobody had bothered to fix it in a decade. It was the kind of place people came to when they had nowhere else to go. Marcus understood that better than most, and 5 years ago he'd worked as a project technician for Graves Engineering in Manhattan. Good salary, benefits, a future that looked like it might actually include retirement and college funds. He and his wife Jasmine had just bought a small house in East Orange. Elijah was 7, obsessed with dinosaurs and soccer. Life wasn't perfect, but it was theirs. Then Jasmine collapsed at work. Heart failure, sudden, brutal. 32 years old and gone before Marcus could process what the doctor was saying. The hospital bills came next, drowning them in debt. Then the layoffs hit. Then the house. Then everything else. Now, Marcus worked nights so he could be there when Elijah woke up, when he went to school, when he came home. Mrs. Dawson, their elderly neighbor, watched Elijah during the evening shift. It wasn't enough. It was never enough. But it was all Marcus had. Tonight the storm made everything worse. Water poured from the sky in sheets, turning the streets into shallow rivers. The diner's windows fogged over, and every time the door opened, cold wind and rain swept inside, soaking the floor. Marcus mopped it up each time without complaint, then returned to the tables, refilling coffee, taking orders, pretending his feet didn't scream with every step. "Marcus!" Jerome called from the kitchen. "Table 6 needs a refill." "On it." Table 6 was Frank Delgado, a long-haul trucker who'd been coming here for years. He sat at the counter, his weathered face creased with exhaustion, his trucker cap stained with sweat. Frank always ordered black coffee and apple pie, always told the same stories, and always left a $5 tip no matter what. "You look like hell, Marcus," Frank said as Marcus poured fresh coffee. "Takes one to know one," Marcus replied with a tired grin. Frank chuckled. "Touché. How's your boy?" Marcus's smile flickered. "He's managing." Frank's expression softened. He'd heard enough over the years to know what managing meant. "Kids are tougher than we think." "Yeah, they have to be." Across the room, Brittany Sullivan hunched over a nursing textbook in booth 3, her cold coffee forgotten. She was 19, studying at Essex County College, working 2 part-time jobs to pay tuition. Marcus had watched her count coins more than once, her face flushing red when she came up short. Tonight, she'd ordered the cheapest thing on the menu, a side salad and water. When Marcus brought her check, he'd already crossed out the total and written 0.00 in his handwriting. "Marcus, I can't." "You can," he said gently. "Pay it forward someday." Her eyes welled up. "I will, I promise." Marcus moved on before she could say more. Gratitude embarrassed him. He wasn't doing anything special. He was just doing what Jasmine would have done. At booth 7, the young mother, Angela, was wiping ketchup off her toddler's face while the little boy giggled and squirmed. Marcus had seen Angela before. Single mom. Worked at the grocery store down the street. She always looked tired, always looked like she was one bad day away from breaking. When her son knocked over a cup of crayons, sending them rolling under the table, Marcus was already kneeling to pick them up. "I'm so sorry," Angela said quickly. "No need to apologize," Marcus replied, handing the crayons back to the boy. "Happens all the time." Angela's smile was fragile but real. "Thank you." "Any time." In the corner booth, the one with the rattling heater and cracked vinyl, sat the woman who didn't belong. Marcus had noticed her the moment she walked in, though he couldn't say why. Maybe it was the coat. Maybe it was the way she moved, like she was used to people stepping aside. Maybe it was the way she ordered chamomile tea and then didn't drink it. Just sat there, watching. She wasn't on her phone, wasn't reading, just observing. Marcus found it unsettling, but he'd learned not to judge. People came to the harbor light for all kinds of reasons. At 10:15, his phone buzzed again. Marcus's stomach dropped. "Jerome, I need a minute." "Go." Marcus stepped into the back, his heart pounding. He answered on the second ring. "Elijah?" "Dad." "It's really bad this time." His son's voice was tight with pain. "Did Mrs. Dawson give you the medicine?" "Yeah, it's not helping." Marcus pressed his palm against the wall. The migraines were getting worse. Last month they'd taken Elijah to the ER when he couldn't stop vomiting. The bill was still sitting on Marcus's kitchen table. Unpaid. Impossible. "I'm going to call Mrs. Dawson, okay? She'll sit with you. I'll be home as soon as I can." "Okay?" Elijah's voice was so small. "I love you, buddy." "Love you too, Dad." Marcus hung up and dialed Mrs. Dawson. She answered immediately. "I heard him crying," she said before Marcus could speak. "I'm already here." "Thank you. I'll be back by 1. "Take your time, Marcus. He'll be okay." But Marcus didn't believe that anymore. Not really. When he returned to the floor, the woman in the corner booth was gone. Her table was clean except for the receipt and the cash. Marcus picked up the receipt. The signature was elegant, precise. Liana Ross. The tip line. $0. Marcus felt the anger rise, then forced it down. People stiffed servers all the time. It wasn't personal. Except then he lifted the plate. The envelope underneath was heavy, expensive, the kind of paper that cost more than Marcus made in a day. Inside was a handwritten note on embossed stationery. "I need to speak with you. Tomorrow, 9 a.m., Horizon Tower, 37th floor. Ask for Dr. Liana Ross." Marcus read it 3 times. Dr. Liana Ross. The Dr. Liana Ross. Biotech billionaire. Philanthropist. The woman who'd been profiled in the New York Times last year for revolutionizing affordable medical technology. Why would she be here? Why would she leave him nothing? And then leave him this? Marcus folded the note, slipped it into his pocket, and finished his shift in a daze. Marcus didn't sleep. He sat at the small kitchen table in his apartment, the note spread out in front of him like a puzzle he couldn't solve. The overhead light buzzed. Outside, the rain had stopped, leaving the streets slick and silent. Elijah was finally asleep in the next room, his breathing slow and steady after the migraine medicine Mrs. Dawson had managed to coax into him. Marcus stared at the words. "I need to speak with you." Why? Why him? Why now? He picked up his phone and searched Dr. Liana Ross. The results flooded the screen. Forbes articles, TED Talks, news stories about her latest charitable foundation. Photos of her shaking hands with governors, senators, CEOs. She was beautiful in the polished, untouchable way that billionaires always were. Blonde hair, sharp features, a smile that looked expensive. Marcus clicked on a video. Dr. Ross standing on a stage in front of thousands of people, talking about healthcare access, about the gaps in the system that swallowed families whole. "I built Ross Biotech because my brother died waiting for treatment we couldn't afford," she said, her voice steady but laced with something raw. "He was 9 years old, and I've spent the last 20 years making sure no one else loses someone the way I did." Marcus's chest tightened. He clicked away. This was insane. Women like Dr. Liana Ross didn't show up at diners in Newark. They didn't sit in cracked booths drinking tea they didn't want. They didn't leave cryptic notes for broke single fathers, unless she wanted something. Marcus's mind spun. Was this some kind of test? A prank? A setup? He thought about the $0 tip, the way she'd watched him all night, the way she'd left without saying a word. It felt deliberate, calculated, and that made him angry. He crumpled the note, threw it toward the trash, then immediately retrieved it, smoothing it out on the table. "What are you doing, Marcus?" he muttered to himself. He couldn't afford to ignore this. Not when Elijah's medical bills were piling up. Not when the rent was due in 6 days and he was still $200 short. Not when every single day felt like he was one catastrophe away from losing everything. But he also couldn't afford to be humiliated. At 6:30 a.m., Elijah shuffled into the kitchen, his face pale, his eyes shadowed. "Morning, buddy," Marcus said, forcing brightness into his voice. "Morning." Elijah poured himself a glass of water, moving slowly, carefully. "How's your head?" "Better. Still hurts, but not as bad." Marcus studied his son. Elijah had Jasmine's eyes, deep brown, expressive, too wise for his age. He was 12 but looked younger, his frame thin, his clothes slightly too big because Marcus bought them with room to grow. "I need to go out this morning," Marcus said. "Just for a couple hours. Mrs. Dawson will check on you, okay?" Elijah nodded. "Where are you going?" Marcus hesitated. "A meeting." "For a job?" "Maybe. I don't know yet." Elijah sat down at the table, looking at his father with that unsettling intensity kids develop when they've been through too much too young. "Is it about money?" Elijah asked quietly. Marcus's throat tightened. "Don't worry about that. I do worry about it, Dad. You're 12. You shouldn't have to. But I do." Marcus reached across the table and squeezed Elijah's hand. "I've got this, okay? I promise." Elijah nodded, but Marcus could see the doubt in his eyes. At 8:15, Marcus put on his best shirt, a light blue button-down Jasmine had bought him for their anniversary 6 years ago. It was wrinkled despite his best efforts with the iron, but it was clean. He paired it with dark jeans and the only pair of dress shoes he owned, their soles worn thin but still presentable. He looked at himself in the bathroom mirror. He looked tired, worn, out of place. But he'd looked worse. Marcus kissed Elijah goodbye, assured Mrs. Dawson he'd be back by noon, and stepped out into the cold December morning. The train ride from Newark to Manhattan took 40 minutes. Marcus stood the entire way, crushed between commuters in suits and winter coats, all of them scrolling through phones, sipping coffee, existing in a world that felt galaxies away from his. Horizon Tower loomed over Midtown like a gleaming monument to everything Marcus wasn't. Glass and steel, 70 floors of wealth and power, the kind of building where security guards wore suits nicer than anything Marcus owned. He walked through the revolving doors and immediately felt like an intruder. The lobby was vast. Marble floors so polished Marcus could see his reflection. A chandelier hung overhead, dripping with crystal. People moved with purpose, their shoes clicking, their conversations clipped and efficient. Marcus approached the security desk, his heart hammering. "Can I help you?" The guard's tone was polite but assessing. "I'm here to see Dr. Liana Ross, 37th floor." The guard's eyebrows lifted slightly. "Name?" "Marcus Hale." The guard typed something into his computer, then picked up a phone. A brief conversation. Then a nod. 37th floor, elevator bank B. Marcus nodded his thanks and walked toward the elevators, feeling every eye in the lobby tracking him. The elevator was empty. Marcus watched the numbers climb, his reflection staring back at him in the polished steel doors. What was he doing? The doors opened on the 37th floor. The reception area was sleek, minimalist, intimidating. A young woman sat behind a glass desk, her smile professional. "Mr. Hale?" "Yes." "Dr. Ross is expecting you." "Right this way." Marcus followed her down a hallway lined with abstract art and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. She stopped at a door, knocked once, then opened it. "Mr. Hale, Dr. Ross." Marcus stepped inside. The office was enormous. Windows wrapped around two walls, offering a panoramic view of Manhattan that made Marcus dizzy. Dr. Liana Ross stood near the window, silhouetted against the skyline, her hands clasped behind her back. She turned. In person, she was smaller than Marcus expected, maybe 5'6", but there was something commanding about her presence, something that made the room feel smaller. "Mr. Hale," she said, her voice warm but measured. "Thank you for coming." "I'm not sure why I did," Marcus replied honestly. Dr. Ross smiled. Not a polite smile. A real one. "Fair enough. Please, sit." Marcus sat in one of the leather chairs facing her desk. She sat across from him, folding her hands on the polished surface. "I owe you an explanation," she began. "You owe me an apology," Marcus said. "That zero tip, that was deliberate." Dr. Ross didn't flinch. "It was." "Why?" "Because I needed to know if your kindness was real." Marcus stared at her. "You tested me." "I did. By humiliating me." "By observing you under pressure," Dr. Ross corrected. "Kindness is easy when you're comfortable. I needed to see if yours endured when you were exhausted, underpaid, and disrespected." Marcus's jaw tightened. "And?" "It did." Silence stretched between them. "I spent 3 weeks researching you, Mr. Hale," Dr. Ross said. "I know about your wife, about Elijah's condition, about the medical bills, about your layoff, about everything you've lost. And I watched you give a bowl of soup to a homeless man, even though you're one missed paycheck away from being in his position." Marcus felt exposed, violated. "Why?" "Because I'm starting a program," Dr. Ross said. "A healthcare initiative for working-class families with medically fragile children. Families like yours, and I need someone to run it. Someone who understands what it's like to be failed by the system. Someone who won't treat people like case files." Marcus blinked. "You want me to run a healthcare program?" "Yes." "I'm a waiter." "You were a project technician. You coordinated logistics, managed teams, solved problems. You have the skills. What you have that I can't teach is empathy." Marcus shook his head. "You don't know me." "I know enough." "No," Marcus said, standing. "You think you know me because you watched me for one night and read some files. You don't know what it's like to hold your kid while he's screaming from pain you can't fix. You don't know what it's like to choose between medicine and rent. You don't get to swoop in and pretend you're saving me." Dr. Ross stood as well, her expression hardening. "You're right. I don't know what that's like, but my brother did. And he died because our mother couldn't afford his treatment. So don't tell me I don't understand suffering." The room went silent. Marcus exhaled slowly. "I'm sorry about your brother. I'm sorry about your wife." They stood there, two people shaped by loss, staring at each other across an impossible divide. "I can't take this job," Marcus finally said. "Why not?" "Because people like you don't help people like me without strings. And I won't let my son become a publicity stunt." Dr. Ross's expression softened. "I'm not asking you to be a charity case, Mr. Hale. I'm offering you a job, a real one, with a real salary. And if you accept, you'll help hundreds of families who are exactly where you are right now." Marcus wanted to believe her, but he'd been disappointed too many times. "I need to think about it," he said. "Take all the time you need." Marcus turned to leave, then stopped at the door. "That 0 tip," he said without turning around. "That hurt." "I know," Dr. Ross said quietly. "I'm sorry." Marcus left without another word. Marcus rode the elevator down in silence, his mind spinning. The lobby was even more crowded now, mid-morning rush filling the space with voices and footsteps. He pushed through the revolving doors and stepped into the cold December air, gulping it like he'd been underwater. What just happened? A job, a real job, running a healthcare initiative that could help families like his. It sounded too good to be true, because it probably was. Marcus walked toward the train station, his hands shoved deep into his pockets. The city moved around him, taxis honking, street vendors calling out, tourists taking photos. He felt invisible in the crowd, just another nobody trying to survive. Except Dr. Liana Ross had seen him. Why? He replayed the conversation in his head, the way she'd admitted testing him, the way she'd defended herself when he pushed back, the way her voice had cracked, just slightly, when she mentioned her brother. She wasn't lying about that. He could tell. But that didn't mean he could trust her. By the time Marcus reached Newark, it was almost noon. He stopped at the corner bodega and bought a sandwich and chips for Elijah, stretching his last $20 as far as it would go. When he got home, Mrs. Dawson was sitting on the couch with Elijah, the two of them watching some nature documentary. "How'd it go?" Mrs. Dawson asked. "I'm not sure yet," Marcus admitted. She studied him with those sharp, knowing eyes. "But something happened." "Yeah, something happened." That evening, after Elijah was asleep, Marcus Googled Dr. Liana Ross again. This time, he dug deeper, found interviews, articles, profiles, read about how she'd built Ross Biotech from nothing, how she'd revolutionized diagnostic equipment for underserved communities, how she'd donated millions to healthcare access programs. There were critics, too, people who called her initiatives performative, people who accused her of using charity as a tax write-off, people who said she exploited her brother's death for publicity. Marcus didn't know what to believe. At 11 p.m., his phone buzzed. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer. "Hello?" "Mr. Hale." "It's Liana Ross." Marcus sat up. "How did you get my number?" "I'm a billionaire. I can get anyone's number." Despite himself, Marcus almost smiled. "What do you want?" "I want you to visit the Ross Medical Center tomorrow. See what we're building. Meet the families we're helping. Then decide." "I already told you." "I know what you told me. I'm asking you to see it firsthand before you say no." Marcus exaggerated. "Why does this matter so much to you?" There was a pause. Then, quietly, "Because I see my brother when I look at your son." Marcus's chest tightened. "Tomorrow, 10 a.m. I'll send a car." "I don't need—" "It's already done. Good night, Mr. Hale." She hung up. Marcus stared at his phone. The next morning, a black sedan pulled up outside Marcus's building at 9:45. The driver was polite, professional, and didn't ask questions. Marcus had told Elijah he had another meeting, promised to be back by afternoon. The Ross Medical Center was in Queens, a modern facility that looked more like a community center than a hospital. Bright murals covered the exterior walls. A playground sat adjacent to the building. Inside, the waiting room was filled with families, parents holding kids, elderly couples, teenagers with worried expressions. Dr. Ross was waiting near the entrance, wearing jeans and a sweater instead of the tailored suit. She looked almost normal. "Thank you for coming," she said. "I haven't decided anything," Marcus replied. "I know. Come on." She led him through the center, introduced him to staff members, nurses, doctors, showed him exam rooms designed to be less intimidating for children, explained the sliding scale payment system that ensured no one was turned away. Then she brought him to a small conference room where 5 families were waiting. "These are people the program has helped," Dr. Ross said. "I thought you should hear from them." One by one they told their stories. A mother whose daughter needed heart surgery they couldn't afford. A father whose son had leukemia. A grandmother raising her grandson who had cerebral palsy. Each story was a variation of the same nightmare Marcus lived every day. The fear, the debt, the impossible choices, and each of them was getting help because of Ross Biotech's initiative. "We were about to lose our house," one mother said, tears streaming down her face. "This program saved us. It saved my daughter's life." Marcus felt something crack inside him. After the families left, Dr. Ross walked Marcus back outside. "I didn't bring you here to manipulate you," she said. "I brought you here because you accused me of not understanding, and you were right. I don't understand what it's like to be in your position, but I understand what it's like to feel powerless, and I've spent 2 decades trying to fix that." Marcus looked at the building, at the murals, at the playground where kids were laughing, despite everything. "If I say yes," he began slowly, "I have conditions." Dr. Ross waited. "No publicity, no press conferences with me standing next to you for photo ops. My son doesn't become part of your story." "Agreed. And if this turns into some corporate PR stunt, I walk immediately." "Understood." Marcus took a breath. "And I want to help decide which families get assistance. Not some algorithm, not some board. Real decisions made by someone who knows what it's like." Dr. Ross extended her hand. "Deal." Marcus shook it. He didn't trust her completely, but for the first time in years, he felt something close to hope. Marcus started the job 3 weeks later. The position was officially titled Community Healthcare Liaison. But in practice, it meant Marcus became the bridge between Ross Biotech's resources and the families who needed them. He reviewed applications, visited homes, sat in hospital waiting rooms, and listened to stories that broke his heart 100 different ways. He was good at it, maybe because he'd lived it. Dr. Ross gave him an office on the 2nd floor of the medical center, a modest space with a window overlooking the playground. His salary was more than he'd made in years, enough to finally pay off some of the medical debt, enough to move Elijah into a better school district, enough to breathe. For the first time since Jasmine died, Marcus felt like he was building something instead of just surviving. And then the news leaked. Marcus never found out who tipped off the press. Maybe it was someone at the diner. Maybe it was a staff member at Ross Biotech. Maybe it was just bad luck. But one Tuesday morning, Marcus woke up to find his face on a local news website. Billionaire's new hire, from waiter to healthcare executive in weeks. The article was. Generous wasn't the right word. Sensational was closer. It painted Marcus as a rags-to-riches story, a feel-good narrative about Dr. Ross rescuing a struggling single father. It mentioned Elijah's medical condition. It mentioned Jasmine's death. It mentioned the diner, the debt, everything Marcus had worked so hard to keep private. And it made him sound like charity. Marcus's phone exploded. Texts from people he hadn't spoken to in years, congratulating him, asking for money, accusing him of using Dr. Ross. Calls from reporters wanting interviews. Emails from strangers offering advice, criticism, threats. At Elijah's school, the whispers started immediately. Your dad's dating a billionaire? Is she like his sugar mama? My mom says he only got the job because he's black, and she needed to look good. Elijah came home on Thursday with a black eye. Marcus found him sitting on his bed, holding a bag of frozen peas to his face, trying not to cry. Elijah! Marcus's voice was barely a whisper. I'm fine. Who did this? Doesn't matter. It matters to me. Elijah finally looked up, his eyes red. They said you're only with Dr. Ross because you want her money. They said we're using her. They said... His voice cracked. They said Mom would be ashamed. Marcus felt something inside him shatter. He pulled Elijah into a hug, holding him tight while his son sobbed into his shoulder. None of that is true, Marcus said. None of it. Then why are they saying it? Because people are cruel. Because they don't understand. Because... Marcus exhaled shakily. Because sometimes the world punishes you for trying to climb out of the hole it put you in. That night, Marcus called Dr. Ross. I need to quit. Silence on the other end. Marcus, I can't do this to my son. He got beaten up because of this, because of me, because of you. I'll have security. Security? Marcus's voice rose. He's 12 years old. He shouldn't need security. He should be worrying about homework and video games, not whether his classmates think his dad is a gold digger. I'll issue a statement. I'll clarify. It won't matter. The damage is done. So you're just going to walk away from a job that's helping people, from families who need you? I'm walking away to protect my son. Dr. Ross was quiet for a long moment, then, softly, I understand. Do you? Yes. Because my mother made the same choice. She quit her second job to take care of my brother, and he died anyway. And she spent the rest of her life wondering if working more hours would have saved him. Marcus closed his eyes. I'm not trying to guilt you, Dr. Ross continued. I'm just saying, sometimes there's no good choice. Only the choice you can live with. Marcus hung up without responding. The next morning, he drove Elijah to school in silence. As they pulled up to the curb, Marcus put the car in park and turned to his son. I'm quitting the job. Elijah's eyes widened. What? Why? Because you're more important. Dad, no. You can't. I already decided. But what about the families? What about the people you're helping? Marcus blinked. Elijah. You told me about them. The mom whose daughter needed surgery, the dad with the kid who has leukemia. You said you were making a difference. I am, but not at your expense. Elijah stared at his father, his jaw set in that stubborn way that reminded Marcus so much of Jasmine. If you quit because of me, Elijah said quietly, I'll never forgive myself. That's not fair. You always tell me to stand up for what's right, even when it's hard, even when people make fun of me. You tell me to keep going. Elijah's voice wavered. So why aren't you? Marcus felt his throat tighten. Because you're my son, and protecting you comes first. Then protect me by showing me it's okay to keep fighting, even when people are mean, even when it's scary. Marcus stared at his 12-year-old son, this kid who'd been through more than most adults, and realized Elijah was braver than he'd ever be. "You sure about this?" Marcus asked. "I'm sure." Marcus nodded slowly. "Okay, but if it gets worse, then we'll deal with it. Together." Marcus drove away from the school feeling like he'd just been given permission to hope again. 2 days later, on a Saturday afternoon, someone knocked on Marcus's apartment door. He opened it to find Dr. Liana Ross standing in the hallway, holding a grocery bag and looking completely out of place in her designer coat and boots. "Dr. Ross," Marcus stammered, "can I come in?" Marcus glanced back at the tiny apartment, the worn furniture, the stained carpet, the kitchen where the cabinet door hung crooked, and felt a wave of embarrassment. Sure." Dr. Ross stepped inside, her eyes sweeping the space without judgment. "This is cozy," she said diplomatically. "It's a dump," Marcus corrected, "but it's ours." Elijah appeared from his bedroom, his eyes widening. "You're Dr. Ross." "I am. And you're Elijah." "How'd you know where we live?" Elijah asked. "I'm a billionaire," she replied with a slight smile. "I can find anyone." "That's creepy," Elijah said. "Elijah," Marcus hissed. Dr. Ross laughed. "He's not wrong." She set the grocery bag on the kitchen counter. "I brought dinner, nothing fancy, just pasta and salad. I thought maybe we could talk." Marcus crossed his arms. "About what?" "About why I really offered you the job." She pulled out a chair at the small kitchen table and sat down. Marcus and Elijah exchanged a glance, then joined her. Dr. Ross folded her hands on the table, her expression more vulnerable than Marcus had ever seen it. "I told you my brother died when I was young," she began. "His name was Ezra. He was 9. Funny, smart, obsessed with space. He wanted to be an astronaut." Elijah leaned forward, listening. "He started getting headaches," Dr. Ross continued. "Bad ones. My mom took him to the free clinic, but they said it was just stress. Migraines. They gave him over-the-counter medication and sent him home." Marcus's stomach tightened. The headaches got worse. Then he started vomiting, losing weight. "My mom knew something was wrong, but we didn't have insurance. Every doctor we called wanted payment up front. Every specialist had a 3-month wait. By the time we got him into an emergency room," her voice cracked, "it was a brain tumor. Stage 4. Inoperable. He died 6 weeks later." Tears slipped down her cheeks. "I was 11, she whispered. "And I watched my little brother die because we were poor." Elijah's face was pale. Marcus reached across the table and gently touched Dr. Ross's hand. "I'm so sorry," Marcus said. Dr. Ross wiped her eyes. "I built Ross Biotech because of Ezra. Every diagnostic tool, every medical device, every program, it's all for him. And when I saw Elijah's symptoms in your medical records—" "Wait," Marcus interrupted. "How did you see Elijah's medical records?" Dr. Ross hesitated. "I may have overstepped some boundaries." "That's illegal." "I know, and I'm sorry. But when I heard you mention your son's migraines that night at the diner, I had to know. I had to make sure." She looked at Elijah. "I had to make sure he wasn't going through what Ezra did." "And?" Marcus's voice was tight. "And I arranged for a diagnostic scan. Anonymously. The hospital listed it as a research study so you wouldn't be billed." Marcus's blood ran cold. "You did what?" "Elijah's fine," Dr. Ross said quickly. "The scan came back clear. No tumors. His migraines are likely genetic, manageable with the right medication, but I needed to be sure." Marcus stood up, his hands shaking. You had no right. I know. You can't just... I know. You crossed every line. I know, Dr. Ross shouted, then immediately softened. I know. And I'm sorry. But I couldn't stand by and watch another child die when I had the resources to help. Marcus sank back into his chair, overwhelmed. Elijah spoke up, his voice small. My migraines aren't going to kill me? Dr. Ross shook her head. No, sweetheart. You're going to be okay. Elijah looked at his father, then back at Dr. Ross. Thank you. Dr. Ross smiled sadly. You're welcome. Marcus rubbed his face. This is insane. I know. You're insane. Probably. Despite everything, Marcus laughed. A short, exhausted laugh that bordered on hysteria. Why are you really here? He finally asked. Dr. Ross met his eyes. Because I need you to come back. Not because I'm trying to save you. Because I need someone who won't let me lose sight of why I started this. Someone who'll push back when I make decisions that sound good in a boardroom but hurt people in real life. Someone who'll remind me that every case file is someone's kid. I'm not qualified for that. You're the most qualified person I've ever met. Marcus looked at Elijah. His son nodded. Okay, Marcus said quietly. But no more secrets. No more crossing lines. We do this the right way, or we don't do it at all. Dr. Ross extended her hand. Deal. Marcus shook it, and for the first time, he believed her. The decision to return wasn't easy, but it was right. Over the next few weeks, Marcus settled back into his role at Ross Biotech with a renewed sense of purpose. Dr. Ross kept her promise. No more boundary violations, no more secrecy. They established protocols, built a team, created systems that ensured every family received fair consideration, regardless of background or connections. Marcus interviewed families personally. He sat in living rooms that smelled like overdue bills and broken dreams. He listened to parents cry, watched kids suffer, and made decisions that felt impossible. Who gets help first when everyone needs help now? It was the kind of moral calculus that kept Marcus awake at night. But slowly, measurably, things improved. A 5-year-old with cystic fibrosis got the medication that stabilized her lungs. A teenager with type 1 diabetes received a continuous glucose monitor that changed his life. A mother with lupus finally got treatment that allowed her to keep working, keep providing for her kids. Every success felt like a small miracle. Every family that walked out of the Ross Medical Center with hope instead of despair felt like a victory against the cruelty of a broken system. Marcus started to believe this might actually work. Then the board meeting happened. Dr. Ross had warned him. They're going to push back. The investors want results, and compassion doesn't show up on a spreadsheet. Marcus attended the quarterly board meeting as an observer. The Ross Biotech boardroom was on the 54th floor of Horizon Tower. All glass and chrome and leather chairs that probably cost more than Marcus's monthly salary. 12 board members sat around the table. Old money, new money, venture capitalists, medical executives. They spoke in acronyms and metrics, reducing human suffering to ROI and cost-benefit analysis. Halfway through the presentation on the Community Healthcare Initiative, one board member, a silver-haired man named Preston Whitmore, cleared his throat. Let's talk about the elephant in the room, Whitmore said. This program is hemorrhaging money. Dr. Ross's jaw tightened. It's an investment in... An investment requires returns. This program has cost us $12 million in 6 months. That's money that could have gone toward R&D, toward products that generate revenue. Another board member, a woman named Victoria Stern, nodded. I appreciate the sentiment, Liana, but sentiment doesn't pay shareholders. This isn't about shareholders, Dr. Ross said, her voice hard. This is about corporate responsibility. Yes, we know, Whitmore interrupted. But there's a difference between corporate responsibility and corporate charity. And right now, this program looks like the latter. Marcus felt his hands curl into fists under the table. We're proposing a restructure, Stern continued. Scale back the program. Focus on families with higher income thresholds. Partner with insurance companies to offset costs. That defeats the entire purpose, Dr. Ross argued. The families we're helping don't have insurance. They don't meet income thresholds. That's why they need help. Then perhaps they need to find help elsewhere, Whitmore said coldly. The room went silent. Marcus stood up, every head turned toward him. Mr. Hale, Whitmore said with barely concealed condescension. You're here as an observer, not a participant. I'm here as the person who actually does the work you're trying to destroy, Marcus said, his voice steady despite the rage burning through him. Marcus, Dr. Ross began. No. Marcus looked around the table. You want to talk about returns? Let's talk about returns. 3 weeks ago, I helped a family whose daughter needed a liver transplant. They were about to lose their house trying to pay for it. We stepped in. She got the transplant. She's alive. That family isn't bankrupt. They're productive members of society who will contribute to the economy for decades because we gave them a chance. That's anecdotal, Stern said dismissively. It's a human life, Marcus shot back. And if that doesn't matter to you, then you're in the wrong business. Watch your tone, Whitmore warned. Or what? You'll fire me? Go ahead. But before you do, let me tell you something about corporate charity. I used to think rich people didn't help because they didn't care. But sitting here, listening to you people reduce suffering to spreadsheets, I realize it's worse than that. You can help. You just choose not to, because helping doesn't make you richer. That's enough, Whitmore said, standing. No, it's not. Marcus turned to Dr. Ross. You told me your brother died because your family couldn't afford treatment. You said you built this company to prevent that from happening to other families. So what are you going to do now? Let these people turn Ross Biotech into just another corporation that values profit over people? Ross stared at him, her expression unreadable. Then she stood. Mr. Whitmore, Ms. Stern, I appreciate your concerns, she said, her voice calm but firm. But this program is non-negotiable. If the board wants to restructure it, you'll need to remove me as CEO first. The room erupted. You can't be serious. This is corporate suicide. Liana, think about what you're saying. Dr. Ross raised her hand, silencing them. I am the majority shareholder. I built this company, and I will not allow it to become the kind of institution that failed my brother. If that means some of you choose to divest, so be it. This program continues. She looked at Marcus. Are we done here? Marcus nodded. They walked out together, leaving the board in chaos behind them. In the elevator, neither of them spoke until they reached the ground floor. That was reckless, Dr. Ross finally said. I know. You could have been fired. I know. And I might have just tanked my company's stock price. Probably. Dr. Ross smiled. Worth it. Marcus smiled back. Yeah, it was. The fallout was immediate. 2 board members resigned within the week. Stock prices dipped 7%. Business journals ran articles questioning Dr. Ross's leadership. calling the healthcare initiative financially irresponsible and unsustainable. But something unexpected happened. Donations started pouring in. Small donors mostly. $5 here, $20 there. People who'd read about the program and wanted to help. Parents who'd been in similar situations. Healthcare workers who'd seen families destroyed by medical debt. Within a month, the program had raised $4 million in grassroots funding. Major foundations took notice. The Gates Foundation offered a matching grant. The Robert Wood Johnson Foundation provided additional funding for research into healthcare access barriers. What had seemed like a crisis became a movement. Marcus threw himself into the work. He trained new staff members, refined application processes, built partnerships with hospitals and clinics across the tri-state area. The program expanded from Queens to Brooklyn, then the Bronx, then Newark. Everywhere Marcus went, he met families who reminded him of his own story. Single parents working 3 jobs. Kids suffering from preventable conditions. People choosing between medicine and rent, between treatment and food. And now, for some of them, there was help. But resistance persisted. Insurance companies pushed back, claiming the program created moral hazard, that free health care would discourage people from buying insurance. Politicians used it as a talking point, some praising it as innovative, others condemning it as socialist overreach. And within the medical community, some doctors refused to participate, worried about liability or skeptical of charity medicine. Marcus learned to navigate the bureaucracy. He became fluent in the language of grants and compliance, of liability waivers and insurance regulations. He built relationships with hospital administrators, negotiated partnerships, and advocated fiercely for the families who couldn't advocate for themselves. 6 months in, Marcus received an email from a woman named Patricia Simmons. "Mr. Hale, you helped my grandson last year when he needed heart surgery. We couldn't afford it. You made it possible. He just turned 7. He's healthy. He's thriving. I don't know how to thank you except to say, you gave our family a future. God bless you." Marcus read the email 3 times, then called Elijah into the room and read it aloud. "That's amazing, Dad," Elijah said, grinning. "It is, isn't it? Are you happy?" Marcus considered the question. He was exhausted. The work was endless. The opposition was relentless. He still worried about money, about Elijah, about whether any of this would last. But yes, he was happy. "Yeah, buddy," Marcus said. "I think I am." The call came at 2 a.m. on a Tuesday. Marcus's phone buzzed, pulling him from sleep. He fumbled for it, his heart already racing because nothing good happened at 2 a.m. "Hello?" "Mr. Hale, this is Dr. Patel from Mount Sinai. Dr. Ross has been admitted. She collapsed during a meeting. She's asking for you." Marcus was dressed and out the door in 5 minutes, leaving a confused Mrs. Dawson to stay with Elijah. When he arrived at the hospital, Dr. Ross was sitting up in bed, looking furious and fragile at the same time. "You shouldn't have come," she said. "What happened?" "Exhaustion, dehydration. The doctors are being dramatic." Dr. Patel, standing nearby, gave Marcus a look that said otherwise. "She's been working 16-hour days for months. Her cortisol levels are dangerously high. She needs rest." "I'm fine," Dr. Ross insisted. "You collapsed," Marcus said. "I tripped." "You collapsed." Dr. Ross glared at him, then sighed. "Maybe a little." Marcus pulled up a chair. "You can't do this." "Do what?" "Burn yourself out trying to save everyone." "You're not invincible. Neither are you. I'm not the one in a hospital bed." Dr. Ross looked away. The board is meeting next week. They're going to try to shut down the program again, permanently this time. I need to be ready. You need to be alive. I'll be fine. Stop, Marcus said firmly. Just stop. You hired me to help you. So let me help. Let me handle the board meeting. They'll eat you alive? Then I'll bring hot sauce. Dr. Ross actually laughed. A real, exhausted laugh that made her look younger, less burdened. Okay, she finally said. But if they destroy you, I'm going to be very annoyed. Noted. The board meeting was scheduled for Thursday at 10 a.m. Marcus spent 2 days preparing. He gathered data, success stories, cost-benefit analyses, projections showing long-term societal savings when families received preventive care instead of emergency intervention. He rehearsed his arguments, anticipated objections, and tried not to vomit from nerves. On Thursday morning, Marcus walked into that glass and chrome boardroom wearing his best suit, a navy blue one Dr. Ross had insisted on buying him over his protests, and faced the 12 people who held the program's fate in their hands. Preston Whitmore sat at the head of the table, his expression smug. Mr. Hale, Dr. Ross is unable to attend, I understand. She's recovering. I'm representing her. How unfortunate. Let's get started, shall we? Whitmore pulled up a presentation, graphs showing the program's costs, charts highlighting investor concerns, projections suggesting Ross Biotech's reputation was suffering. In summary, Whitmore concluded, this program is unsustainable. We're proposing immediate termination and reallocation of resources toward revenue-generating initiatives. Motion to vote, Victoria Stern said immediately. Seconded, another board member added. Marcus stood. Before you vote, I'd like to say something. Whitmore sighed. Mr. Hale, we've heard enough. You've heard numbers. You haven't heard about Malika Henderson, who's 7 years old and has sickle cell disease. Without our program, her family couldn't afford her medication. She was in the hospital twice a month. Now, she hasn't been hospitalized in 6 months. She's in school. She's thriving. Anecdotal, Stern began. You haven't heard about David Wu, who's 16 and diabetic. His family was rationing his insulin because they couldn't afford it. He nearly died. Now he has a continuous glucose monitor and his A1C levels are normal. Mr. Hale, you haven't heard about Carmen Ortiz, who's a single mother with lupus. She lost her job because she couldn't afford treatment and was too sick to work. Now she's back on her feet, employed, paying taxes, contributing to society. Marcus looked around the table. You want to talk about returns? Here's the return. Every family we help is a family that won't end up homeless, won't declare bankruptcy, won't burden the emergency healthcare system that costs taxpayers billions. Every kid we keep healthy is a kid who won't miss school, who'll graduate, who'll grow up to contribute to the economy you care so much about. That's theoretical, Whitmore protested. It's reality, Marcus shot back. And the only reason you can't see it is because you're measuring the wrong things. You're measuring quarterly profits instead of human lives. You're measuring stock prices instead of societal value. He pulled out a folder and dropped it on the table. In here are letters from 143 families we've helped. Read them, learn their names, understand what your vote actually means. Whitmore stared at the folder like it might bite him. You want to shut down this program, Marcus continued. Fine, vote. But when you do, know that you're voting to let kids suffer. You're voting to let families drown. You're voting to become the exact kind of institution Dr. Ross built this company to fight against. He turned to leave, then stopped at the door. Dr. Ross's brother was named Ezra. He was 9 years old when he died because his family couldn't afford treatment. She's spent 20 years trying to make sure that never happens to another child, and you're going to destroy that legacy because it doesn't make you rich enough." Marcus walked out. Behind him, silence. Then, faintly, he heard Victoria Stern say, "I'd like to change my vote." The program survived, not unanimously. Whitmore and 2 others still voted to shut it down, but the majority of the board voted to continue funding, with one condition. Marcus would serve as program director with full operational control, reporting directly to Dr. Ross. It was more responsibility than Marcus had ever imagined. It was also exactly where he needed to be. Over the next year, the program expanded to 12 cities. Partnerships with major hospitals solidified. Federal grants provided additional funding, and Marcus became something he'd never expected, a voice for families who'd spent their lives being ignored. He spoke at conferences, testified before state legislators, appeared on panels discussing healthcare access and poverty. But his favorite part of the job remained the same, sitting across from families and telling them, "We're going to help you." Elijah thrived. His migraines became manageable with the right medication. He joined the robotics club at his new school, made friends, started talking about college even though he was only 13. On a Friday evening, a year and a half after that fateful night at the Harbor Light, Marcus did something he hadn't done in months. He went back to the diner, not to work, just to visit. Jerome was still manning the grill. Brittany, now in her 2nd year of nursing school, was waiting tables. Frank Delgado sat at the counter, telling a story about a load of refrigerators in Montana. "Marcus," Jerome called from the kitchen. "Look who's too fancy for us now." Marcus laughed. "Never too fancy for this place." He ordered coffee and pie, sat at the counter, and soaked in the familiar chaos. The door creaked, the heater rattled, the jukebox played the same 3 songs. It felt like home. At the table near the window, a man sat alone, mid-30s, wearing a worn jacket, his shoulders hunched with exhaustion. A little girl, maybe 5, sat across from him, coloring on a paper placemat. Marcus watched them, saw the man check his phone, his face tightening, saw him count bills in his wallet, his jaw clenching. Marcus recognized that look. When the man's check came, he stared at it for a long moment before pulling out crumpled cash. Marcus stood, walked to the register, and quietly paid the bill. "But that guy," the cashier began, "tell him it's taken care of." "Who should I say?" "Don't." Marcus returned to his seat. A few minutes later, the cashier brought the man his receipt. The man's eyes widened. He looked around the diner, confused. Then he noticed something tucked under his coffee cup. An envelope. The man opened it, read the note inside, and froze. Marcus watched as tears welled in the man's eyes. The note read, "You're doing better than you think. Keep going, and when you're ready, pass it forward." Below that, Marcus had written the address of the Ross Medical Center and a phone number to call for help. The man looked around again, searching for whoever had left it. Marcus had already slipped out the door. He walked to his car, the cold December air biting at his face. He thought about Jasmine, about the woman in the cream coat who'd changed his life, about Elijah asking, "If you can help other families like us, shouldn't you?" He thought about kindness, how it moved through the world like an invisible current, connecting strangers across time and circumstance. Marcus pulled out his phone and called Elijah. "Hey, Dad," Elijah answered. "When are you coming home?" "Soon, buddy. Just wanted to hear your voice." "You okay?" Marcus smiled. "Yeah, I really am." He hung up, started the car, and drove toward the life he'd built from the wreckage, a life that still had struggles, still had doubts, but also had purpose. And as he merged onto the highway, the city lights spreading before him like constellations, Marcus made a promise to himself. He would never forget what it felt like to be desperate. He would never forget the woman who saw him when he felt invisible, and he would never stop paying it forward. One family, one meal, one note at a time. Because that's how the world changed. Not through grand gestures or dramatic transformations, but through small acts of kindness that rippled outward, touching lives in ways you'd never see but always mattered. The rain had stopped, the storm had passed, and Marcus Hale was finally, truly, home.